Hi, and we want to thank you and welcome you to another episode of Silent Voices. Today we have Cassandra Burgtorf with us, who's been through a lot with the family court systems, and we just want to thank you for coming on the show. I would like to ask you first, now you have a son, and Robert, and what is his age?
He just turned 10 November 7th, 2014.
Okay, and it's my understanding that Robert was removed. What was he exactly removed from the home for?
In around 2006, I was going through a rough patch, and I did have a drug issue. So somebody had called Child Protective Services, and they had first came out a couple months before that and said everything was fine, that Robert had a home and everything. During this time, we had moved like kind of across the street to a different apartment building, and the police, it was a domestic violence case. I had talked to my dad about something, then it had got through to somebody else in the family, and they had called CPS, and the CPS had came, and they knocked on the door. Nobody answered the door, and then they called the police, which is supposed to be the other way around. The police is supposed to come for a welfare check, and then the CPS worker is supposed to come. That's not how they did it. They did it backwards. And they came in and got my son on December 2nd, 2006. And there was no kind of abuse, no kind of emergency order to get him out of the house. So they basically illegally seized my son on November 2nd, 2006. But they didn't have the paperwork. I have it right here to seize him until December 4th, 2006. So that's 24 hours later.
Okay. So now, just to clear up something.
48 hours, excuse me.
Okay. Just to clear up something or clarify, you are now, and you admit you had some issues then, but you are now currently drug-free and rehabilitated.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you've really turned your life around and, gotten everything together. Why was there, as far as the information you received, why was there no order of removal until December 4th?
According to my family, my dad said that because it was actually my brother, that had called on me. According to my dad, he said they had did that in the middle of the week. I'm guessing, it's just by the paperwork and everything that I found out since then, they waited so that they could remove him illegally and under certain grounds, because the dates don't match up. The time that the CPS was called, since I do know who the caller was, and exactly when they came and got him does not match up. Right. So they kind of went around the loopholes to try to steal my son from me, and they did it any way they could do it.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify that we at Silent Voices here take drug and alcohol addictions very seriously, and I wanted to say that that's, we're really proud of you for, taking the steps that you needed to get yourself clean and do what you did for your son. Now, you went to rehab for 3 months, and you would have liked to entrust your son with your father, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. My son, Robert William Burgtorf III, is named after my father, Robert William Burgtorf Jr. The reason why my son and my father, his grandfather, were very close. They were very close, and the reason why they said that my dad could not have him is because he was a truck driver. My sister was in foster care a few years before this, and my dad fought to get her out. He worked at GM for over 10 years, Goodyear for, I think at GM 20 years, and Goodyear for at least 10 years. I mean, he's a reputable man. He's a good man in the community, pays his taxes. He has no drug or criminal history. Absolutely nothing wrong with him. And he was denied custody of my son while I was in rehab. And my father kept trying to get Robert, and they denied him.
Did they give a reason why they were denying him?
They said because he was a truck driver, and my father told them that he would come off the road, and you know, he had a house and everything. He just had the buyout from GM. It would have been very easy for him to take care of Robert, and he's a master mechanic. It's not hard for, you know, that occupation to get a job.
Okay, and why, in your understanding, now I've got some things here. You were diagnosed with quite a few things by, was it CPS?
I was working with Child Protective Services, actually Child and Family Services on 5 Oaks Drive in Lansing. I was working with them. My first caseworker was Christine Sayers. She was supposed, you know, she got me involved into some mental health after I got out of rehab, and they told me that I had to take this medication in order to get my son back, and it was Seroquel. They diagnosed me with bipolar at the time, and put me on up to 800 milligrams of Seroquel during this fight. That was community mental health. Now, community mental health was working with Child and Family Services on 5 Oaks Drive to take my son from me, because I have never went there until they made me go there to get my son back. It was like I had to see multiple caseworkers. I had to deal with multiple people, and they made me sign a release between each one of them. So everybody was sharing information, and I'm only here just like trying to fight to get my son back. You know, it was like I got a whole team against just me.
Right. Now, there's something that we talked about before the show that really jumped out on me, you know, at me, and just, you know, set me back. I seen that and I thought, wow, that's really, and that is that in the process of Child Services diagnosing Cassandra with certain issues, one of them issues was pedophilia.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sure you're all, you know, sitting there with your eyes huge. I was too. What I wanted to ask you and share with the viewers is that, have you ever, in the course of your years on Earth, been inappropriate with, or even accused of being inappropriate with a child?
No, ma'am. Actually, what had happened was during the 1.5-year fight, it was only neglect. So this is the only child I've been in contact with is my son.
And that was while you were on drugs, so that's what you were working towards, straightening it out, you know, and getting...
No, they did not. They waited until after they forced me to sign off my rights, and was it January, February, March, April, May 2008 to January 2009, when my son's, the exact year and month that my son was adopted out, to put this on my record as a pedophilia. What I'm saying is, why they waited until, if it was true, why did they wait all the way until he was adopted out?
Right.
Why wouldn't, I would immediately, and who's going to help a pedophile? Yeah. That's the one diagnosis you need to give somebody if you want to discredit anything they say to you.
Now, do you still have that diagnosis?
No, ma'am. They took it off my record.
They did?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there any other diagnoses that they took off your record as well?
No, ma'am. That's the only one I fought for, because I knew it was an injustice to me. Mm-hmm. And I walked around like that for 5 years and just found out about it in February.
Okay.
And just got it took off. It took them 3 months to take it off after I found out about it.
So, and now you still have these other, who diagnosed you with these mental health issues? Was it CPS or was it a psychiatrist?
I worked with the psychiatrist at Child and Family Services. They diagnosed me as bipolar, which is not my diagnosis. I have borderline personality disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. Them are the two problems that I do have. And they diagnosed me. They were using community mental health to take my son from me, because I was told that if I stopped going to community mental health, my son would be taken from me. So either way, I had to do it. And this is how they got this into my paperwork. Now, obviously, they got a copy of all that because there was a release signed during that time. So they have a copy of this diagnosis that's not true, and I don't know what they're telling my son.
Right.
You know, and I've never did anything like that. So there's no reason why it should be on there. Even the doctor done signed off on it and said, it's an error. But it's an error for 5 years. I had to walk around like that, and it's not fair.
That's a terrible, terrible stigma to have now. I just wanted to share with you briefly. There's a story that kind of ties in with yours, and I'll just try to take a quick minute to tell this. But there's a mom, and I can't remember where she is, but I spoke to her a few weeks back, and she was actually put on the sex registry, and the reason was that she fled with her child in order to protect that child from abuse with dad. So yours is not the first case of misdiagnosis by CPS that I am aware of. And I just wanted to say I'm really sorry that you've been put through that. To have that placed on you is just, I can't even imagine. That's terrible. It's my understanding that they gave you Seroquel
Yes,
to
ma'am.
treat you. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what that was about?
Yes, ma'am. When I first got out of rehab, after completing 3 months and getting my certificate, I came back into foster care. They would not allow me to see my son in them 3 months, but they did allow my dad to see him at the time, and my dad's visits got ripped from him for no reason. And then when I got out, they sent me to the psychologist that's at Child and Family Services on 5 Oaks Drive, Dr. Zach. And he diagnosed me with bipolar, and then they started writing up a whole bunch of paperwork and all kinds of things, which is not true. They went on my biological mom's diagnosis and diagnosed me with bipolar. Then they put me on 800 milligrams. They started me off slow, like 200, 300, and they kept raising it. And I was told that if I did not take the medication, that I was never going to see my son again. They were going to make sure I never seen them again. So I had to do what they told me to do.
Okay. And you've also been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and what exactly was that from?
Yes, ma'am. Just from everything that I've been through in my life, the loss of my son has brought great traumatic experience to my life. I'll just break down crying some days. Some days I just can't handle it. I don't want to be around people. I don't want to see kids because it just comes up, all them feelings, and then when I see the caseworker or I see the people around town, it just brings up all them feelings of like how I was wrongly done, and the traumatic part about it, it's like torture taking a child from their mother and taking the child off somewhere. The kid don't know anything. I don't know anything. I can't protect him. And like with the pedophilia stuff, it's like, are you molesting my son? Like, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Why would you want this on my paperwork so much? You went through all this work to get this on my paperwork. Now after 5 years, I got it removed. I want to know, are you molesting my son?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a question that most parents would ask if they had been incorrectly given that diagnosis, that there's got to be something. And it's just really unfortunate that everything your son has to go through now. I understand in 2008 that they wanted you to take less psychiatric medications.
Well, it was like 2008, 2008, around that area, I had went to my primary care physician, and she had told me, I'm not going to say her name for, reasons or whatever, but she had told me I was on way too much medication. So I got the paper here. She put me on 75 milligrams of Effexor. And so I got off of it, and then it was like, this is 4/19/2008 that I was on the Effexor, so they started to wean me off, and then like right after that, everything went down. Like they started to take less from me, call me and tell me my son couldn't come to the visit because he was sick. Like, it was just excuse after excuse, not coming to do a home study. I had been waiting for like a whole year for him to come look at the house that I had for my son, the room that I had for him, the food that I had in the fridge. They refused to come. I was working. I was doing everything I could in the year and a half fight to try to get my son back.
And that sounds a lot like our previous guest was saying that fathers do as well, or unhealthy parents.
Right.
Okay, and it's my understanding that the paperwork is to be signed by the caseworker that's dealing with your case, and why didn't he report that to the court that he was on the case?
Yes, ma'am. Child and Family Services on Five Oaks Drive first had Christine Sayers as my caseworker. She was my caseworker for about close to a year. And then when the 6 months before they forced me to sign off, they brought on Stephen Holmes. His name is Stephen Holmes at Child and Family Services on Five Oaks Drive. They brought him in on my case, and in my court paperwork that I had received a copy of, he never reported himself as the caseworker. And there's a section on here on the back of the page, and this is from 5/2008 when he was my caseworker, because I got a paper right here saying that he was my caseworker. His name is circled right here, Stephen Holmes, 5 Oaks Drive, Child and Family Services, 5/2008. That's from 4/19/2008. He was my caseworker until the end. And right here is a little section, excuse me, right here on the back, you see where it has who gets all the copies. Why is Christine Sayers still on there at the end of the fight when Stephen Holmes was on my case?
Right. So if CMH was found incompetent due to the false diagnosis that was given to you, what is the reason they're giving you now that you and your son can't be reunited? We just have a few more minutes, but I would like to know what they're telling you.
From community mental health standpoint, this is just one error that they found, the pedophilia diagnosis, which they done signed off on and said this is an error. Okay, it's an error after 5 years I've been walking around with this. So I've been talking to caseworkers up there and stuff, and I believe personally that they're all working together. None of them want to see me get my son back because the money keeps flowing in, and they're going to keep getting cash for my son, Social Security, and whatever they need, you know, from the federal government and the state to take care of him. And I believe that community mental health is working with them to keep my son from me.
Right.
And they're not willing to, I asked them, I told them I want a whole new case number. I want a whole new case because none of this stuff, you can't prove any of this stuff. It's all written up. Like even that pedophilia, that's the worst thing that you can give somebody. Like that should show right there that the whole record is a void. There's nothing that they can do.
Now, if there's anything you would like to say to Robert that he could hear now or within the next few years or at any time, what would you tell your son?
That I love you.
You can look right over at that camera and talk to him.
That I love you, Robert, and Steve Holmes is not your father, and I know that he's raising you right now after he forced me to sign off my rights. And now he's raising you. He's done took you from all your family. We love you. We're praying for you. And I just pray that God just keep his hand over your life and that you become the man of God that he's designed you to be. And you're always in my heart. And I just celebrated your 10th birthday without you.
I'm so sorry, Cassandra.
I had a cake for you, and, you know, I gave a couple a football and a basketball to a needy couple for your birthday, and I love you, and I'm praying for you, and I'm always going to keep this last picture you gave me, and I just pray that Steve Holmes and you guys realize what you did by kidnapping my son. It was not right, and it's not legal, and I am coming after you.
A very handsome young man.
Yes,
we thank you so much for being on the show. I know this was not easy for you. That's why we're doing what we're doing, to expose the corruption that's taken place. Thank you so much, Cassandra.
Thank you.